In the late 8th century, Europe believed it was entering an age of stability. Kingdoms were rising, Christianity was spreading, and monasteries were becoming centers of learning and faith. For centuries, the people of Europe believed the world beyond their northern seas was distant, cold, and mostly empty. Monasteries were peaceful places where monks prayed, wrote sacred texts, and preserved knowledge. They believed that the walls of faith and the protection of God kept them safe from the chaos of the outside world. But in the year 793 AD, that belief would be shattered forever by a sudden and terrifying event that historians now consider the beginning of the Viking Age. The target of this shocking attack was a small island off the northeast coast of England called Lindisfarne. To outsiders, it might have seemed like just another quiet island surrounded by cold waves and strong winds, but to the Christian world, it was one of the holiest places in northern Europe. On this island stood the famous Lindisfarne Monastery, a sacred center of faith where monks spent their lives praying, studying, and copying religious manuscripts by hand. These manuscripts took months or even years to complete and were considered priceless treasures of knowledge and devotion. Life on Lindisfarne was calm and predictable. The monks followed a daily rhythm of prayer, work, and reflection. At sunrise, they gathered in the chapel, their voices echoing through the stone walls as they recited sacred hymns. During the day, they tended gardens, wrote manuscripts, and cared for travelers who visited the monastery. The sea that surrounded the island felt like a natural shield, separating this holy place from the dangers of the mainland. No one could have imagined that the same sea would soon carry warriors who would change European history forever. In the months before the attack, strange and unsettling events were reported across England. According to the medieval record known as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, people claimed to see terrifying signs in the sky. Bright flashes of lightning appeared without storms, violent winds tore across the land, and some witnesses even claimed to see fiery dragons flying through the heavens. To modern readers, these accounts may sound mythical or exaggerated, but to the people of the 8th century, they were seen as divine warnings. Many believed that God was sending signs that something terrible was about to happen. Then, on a summer morning in the year 793, the peaceful routine of Lindisfarne was interrupted by something unusual on the horizon. Fishermen and monks began noticing dark shapes moving across the water. At first, they looked like ordinary ships, but as they came closer, their shape became clearer. These vessels were long, narrow, and unlike the ships commonly seen along the English coast. Their carved prows rose high above the waves, often decorated with dragon-like figures meant to intimidate enemies and ward off evil spirits. These were the legendary Viking longship. Inside those ships were warriors from the north, men who would soon become feared across Europe as the Vikings. These Norse raiders came from the rugged lands of Scandinavia, where long winters, limited farmland, and harsh conditions shaped a culture of survival and strength. They were skilled sailors, capable of navigating vast oceans and shallow rivers with remarkable precision. Their longships were engineering marvels for their time, built to move quickly across both deep seas and narrow waterways. With sails catching the wind and rows of oars cutting through the waves, these ships could appear suddenly and disappear just as quickly. As the ships approached Lindisfarne, the monks on the island likely watched with curiosity rather than fear. Foreign traders occasionally visited coastal regions, and there was little reason to assume these newcomers had hostile intentions. But the moment the ships struck the shore, the truth became terrifyingly clear. The warriors jumped from their ships and rushed toward the monastery. They carried axes, swords, and round wooden shields, their movements fast and coordinated. The monks had no defenses. They were men devoted to prayer, not war. Within moments, the peaceful monastery was transformed into a scene of chaos. Doors were smashed open, sacred halls were invaded, and the silence of prayer was replaced with shouts and screams. The Vikings tore through the monastery, searching for wealth. gold crosses, silver chalices, jeweled reliquaries, and other precious items were taken from altars and sacred rooms. These treasures had been donated over generations by kings, nobles, and devoted believers, and they represented both spiritual and material wealth. Some monks were killed during the raid, struck down without mercy. Others were beaten or dragged away to be sold as slaves in distant markets. Priceless manuscripts, written carefully by hand over many years, were scattered across the floors or destroyed in the violence. For the raiders, these books held little value compared to gold and silver. The entire attack was swift and brutal. The Vikings did not stay long. Their goal was not to conquer the island, but to take what they could and leave before any organized resistance could arrive. Within a short time, they returned to their ships, carrying stolen treasures and captured prisoners. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they sailed away into the open sea. When the survivors looked around the monastery, the devastation was overwhelming. Buildings were damaged, sacred objects were gone, and the once peaceful island had been transformed into a place of mourning and fear. But the impact of the raid would extend far beyond Lindisfarne itself. News of the attack spread quickly throughout England and across the Christian world. Monasteries were supposed to be safe places, protected by faith and respected even during times of war. The idea that foreign raiders would attack such a sacred site was shocking. Many people struggled to understand why such a tragedy had occurred. One of the most famous reactions came from the scholar and church leader Alcuin of York. Writing in response to the attack, he expressed deep sorrow and disbelief, asking how such violence could be allowed to happen at a holy place like Lindisfarne. For many Christians of the time, the raid was interpreted as a punishment from God for the sins of society. But historians today see the event differently. The raid on Lindisfarne, known historically as the Lindisfarne Raid, marked the beginning of a new era of exploration, conflict, and cultural exchange known as the Viking Age. Over the next 2.5 centuries, Viking raiders would strike coastlines across Europe. They attacked monasteries, towns, and trading centers in England, Ireland, Scotland, and France. Using their fast ships, they sailed deep into rivers and launched surprise attacks far inland. Cities that believed themselves safe from sea raids suddenly found Viking warriors appearing at their gates. Yet, the Vikings were not only raiders. Many were traders, explorers, and settlers. Some established permanent settlements in the lands they once attacked. Viking communities appeared in places such as England, Ireland, and northern France. In fact, the region of Normandy in France takes its name from the Norse settlers who eventually ruled there. Viking explorers also pushed the boundaries of the known world. They sailed west to Iceland and Greenland, and centuries before Christopher Columbus, Norse explorers reached the shores of North America. But all of these events trace their historical beginning back to that single shocking moment in 793, when Viking ships first appeared at Lindisfarne. Today, the island of Lindisfarne remains a place of history and reflection. Visitors can walk along its windswept shores and explore the ruins of the ancient monastery. Standing there, it is possible to imagine the moment when dark shapes appeared on the horizon and a new chapter of European history began. What happened on that island more than 12 centuries ago was not just a raid. It was the moment Europe realized that powerful new forces were rising from the north. Forces that would reshape kingdoms, challenge religions, and change the course of history forever. The raid that shocked Europe was only the beginning.